This is Connect Youth. Good morning to you. I'm Steph Seidel. I'm here with General Manager of 91.1 The Bridge, Rick Kirshner.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Ashley Stacy, counselor at Legacy Counseling. Hello there.
Hello.
Hey, guys. So we've got a topic today that is pretty much everywhere. I saw an episode of Dr. Phil the other day that it was on this. Social media is just crazy with it. And it seems to happen every month or so, or every 2 months, that this topic comes back up. So we're going to chat a little bit about what happened on Valentine's Day last week in Florida, which was 17 young lives were taken in a school shooting. And it breaks my heart. I can't believe that it keeps happening. It's pretty awful. But one of the things that we wanted to open the conversation about was just why is it happening and what is really going on? And I'd love to get some brief ideas from you guys. Why is this happening, do you think?
Well, good question. I don't think it's that simple. Do you?
No, it's not. It's not a simple answer whatsoever.
Yeah. First, we do want to pay our respects to the families and all those who have lost loved ones at that tragic event, and everybody in the school system there that's reeling over this atrocity, right? So we just want to pay our respect and acknowledge their lives, and offer our prayers and our positive words for those that are grieving right now. So this is for the family. So crazy question. It's been a question that's emerging more and more for the last probably 30 years. I read books by Michael Medved and Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, who talked about stop teaching our children to kill. And Lieutenant Grossman he's retired military professor at West Point, and they talked about the process of teaching American soldiers how to kill. And because what happened naturally was, in the past, people were reluctant to kill. People didn't kill. They couldn't get soldiers to kill. And you look at the analysis of some of the battles of the World War I, World War II, and previous wars, and people just don't naturally have a propensity to kill, according to psychologists. They say that they just don't want to do that. But he said over the years, because of various factors, that people now are killing is normalized in secular culture today, and that it's much easier for people to kill. And there's a whole bunch of other psychological factors involved there. But his premise was we are literally teaching our children to kill. And when you look at the normalization of killing and murder and things that we see in primetime TV and other media violence, music, we have to ask the question, are we actually training our kids to kill or desensitizing them to the value of life, which makes it easier to kill? And of course, we look at psychological factors. I'm sure Ashley's going to get into that, psychological factors. But if there is a predisposition to violence, we are going to see what certain things are going to trigger that. And if we see multi-billion-dollar video games, that's normal, and that's, you get famous for doing acts of violence, then we're probably going to see more and more of this. And that's what Lieutenant Colonel Grossman said. He said he's an expert witness in the judicial system, the American judicial system. He said we can pinpoint exactly when the next copycat will happen from this one. He said that's how accurate and how predictable it is. So I don't know, but we certainly do have a problem on our hands, and I tend to think there is a solution. I think we can sensitize people to love and respect, but we'll get into that, I'm sure, later. Why do you think, Ashley, are we seeing this?
That's a big question. I think for sure the normalization of violence, or the normalization of, guns and hatred and everything like that across religions, across different nationalities, even in schools. If we're talking about teenagers, it's bullying, how normalized that is, and the lack of respect or the lack of care for another human being in the face of everything that an individual is going through, I think is definitely a factor that needs to be considered when these things come up or when these situations happen. I don't think it's necessarily the only thing. I don't think video games or violence in movies or music or just coarse language and everything like that teenagers in society are just bombarded with nowadays is the only thing that affects someone's decision to walk into a school and commit that act. I definitely think it's a factor. It's a major factor in it. But I think there's also other major factors that kind of add to the equation of someone deciding to do that.
What do you think some of those are?
Yeah, for sure. When we're looking at a situation like this, a lot of people are looking for answers. They're like, well, we want an answer. Why did this happen? Why did someone decide to do that? And you know what, for the families, again, that are grieving this loss, you know what, they have a right to kind of seek an answer. I don't think it's a simple answer whatsoever. There's different components that contribute to it, and I would kind of steer away from labeling it one specific thing.
Exactly.
Like labeling it as, oh, it's just a mental health concern, or it's just a gun violence or gun access concern.
Right.
It's definitely a combination of them, right? So when you're looking at someone's life, it's considering, you know, what happened in their life, how did they grow up, what was their family dynamic, how were they taught to handle different emotions, how were they taught to express different emotions, what was going on in their life, was there abuse, was there abandonment, all of those different things that lead to a person to believe in a specific way that this is kind of the only way out, or this is the only action that I can do to kind of get attention or make a statement. So part of that, yes, can be mental health. And like we discussed before, everyone has a certain level of a mental health, right? It's how we take care of that. And it's not just the responsibility of the individual, especially for kids and teenagers. If you're under the age of 25, your brain is still developing. So trying to develop a mature and accurate way of handling your emotions, sometimes you can't do that alone. You need support, right? So the supports around that individual is also another factor of how they were cared for and what kinds of things or what kind of signs were there in that person's life that would lead someone who's in a support position or someone in their life that would be the person who provides that support to kind of let them know, hey, something's a little bit off and stuff like that. And also you go into, I know the individual, the most recent one in Florida, there was some media reports about them having some grief and loss.
Right.
There was some family scenarios there. Now, we don't know the full truth. We don't know the full story. But that is an important component as well, grief and loss in somebody's life. And again, grief and loss looks different for everybody. So not being able to have like proper supports or even people being aware, or maybe the signs weren't there, maybe they were, the level of concern or the level of kind of awareness of those concerns, or I'm thinking of a word, but I can't get it to my mind, just kind of the heaviness of those signs and how they were taken kind of thing. All those things kind of, you know, affect how someone deals with grief and loss, right? And sometimes different emotions come out of grief and loss, whether that be anger, whether that be lashing out, whether that be isolation. So all those different things need to be considered for sure. But yeah.
What about the thought? Some people, Grossman used to talk about, you know, it's a person's claim to fame. You know, I mean, everybody wants to be famous, everybody wants to be a rock star, and some people that are just kind of anonymous in their life and think they're going to be anonymous forever, decide that they want their name to go down in infamy, and they do something like this. And I really applaud Canadian and American networks. They don't glorify anymore the shooter. And they barely mention the name of the person. They just say, you are going to get no recognition for this, because really those people that are starving some kind of attention or whatever, you know, they could, and they have these other factors and predispositions. That is another kind of maybe motivator for some people to do something like this. So it's a pretty complex issue. It's not
very much.
You know, and it drives me crazy when I hear some of the dialogue on the TV and other news reports is that, well, this is the issue. This is the issue. It's gun control or this. Well, there's truth to the fact that you know. More controlled access to high-powered firearms and things that's truthful. And you know, as a policeman, my background as a policeman, I mean, we saw lots of people die because a child walked into a room where dad was sitting and his handgun was on the side of the bedstand and the child just playing a game and shoots his brother. So that's just access. But that you shouldn't make a big law that closes down all handguns. You should, deal with the dad that doesn't know how to control his firearm. So they're complex, but the narrative that's going one way, or this is going to be the thing that's going to solve the problem, or this is going to solve the problem, or this approach is going to solve the problem, is just not true. And this is where collective impact strategies come in that we talk about all the time in community development. Like, it's a collective impact that the media has to be working on the problem, the police has to be working on the problem, the education sector has to be working on the problem, psychology and social services have to work on the problem. So always everyone feeding in and speaking to the problem and helping educate and bring some controls or something into it is what's absolutely necessary. And
yeah, lots of good stuff to talk about here. And I think we're going to just take a break and come back and say some more. This is Connect Youth. This is Connect Youth. I'm Steph Seidel. I'm here with Rick Kirshner and Ashley Stacy, and we're talking about a heavy topic today, school shootings, thoughts on why they happen, and a little bit of social media and things that are going on since it. I saw this post, and I'm just going to read it to you, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. It says, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people." Well, of course they do. We want mandatory safety courses for people, not guns. We want more thorough background checks of people, not guns. We want stricter negligence penalties imposed on people, not guns. And if you're silly enough to think activists are angry at guns, you're too silly to own one. What do you think about that?
Wow. I have to think about that last statement. I tend to think it's a people problem. Everything's a people problem. And I mean, if you look from a biblical worldview, I mean, wickedness is stored up in the heart of people. And if people aren't involved with the loving community, and there's psychological factors and emotional factors and sociological factors in their life, that they're not supported, they will rise up and do something. And I love the book Crucial Conversations, and they say, if you do not speak up, you will act up. If you're psychologically affected and bothered by something, you will act out, and that's a proven fact of human behavior. So these things happen. It's a people problem. There's other things we can do to control maybe some of the triggers at a preemptive, way, but there's also ways how do we protect if somebody does go over the edge. So these are good questions, but I do believe it's a people problem, and but it's so complex, as Ashley said before. You just don't know what you're dealing with, and you've got one set of rules to govern a whole set of circumstances, and one shoe doesn't fit all. Bottom line. So we got to deal with this problem, and that's where we're at. What do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Obviously, a gun doesn't just shoot itself, just like cars don't drive themselves and everything like that. I know there's been a lot of social media comments on those things, like, well, if we're going to ban guns, then we have to ban this, and this. It's the people operating those things, right? And again, it is a complex issue, but it comes down to someone's choice to use it in that way.
Mm-hmm. Look at what happened with impaired driving. So I've been in police. I was in policing for over 35 years. I've watched what's happened with impaired driving. Impaired driving was a common thing when I was a policeman back in the 80s. Man, every third person was driving intoxicated or over the legal limit. It really was. And over years and years and years, and retweaking the criminal code and the justice system, putting a significant penalty on damage caused or lives lost as a result of impaired drivers, it slowly changed the mindset or the zeitgeist of the community. And now we have high, strict penalties for people that are drive impaired, and certainly stricter penalties for those people that cause death or injury or loss of property. And that is curbing the behavior. So I think, again, that is something that we have to work at in terms of weapons. Now, we have stricter gun control laws in Canada than in the States, and we see less accidents and less acts of violence per capita. You look at, I believe, we'd have to check this, but I believe you look in Britain, they have less and less, they don't carry a lot of weapons. Even the police don't. Some do now carry weapons, but they carry a billy stick. So, I mean, if you want to use the argument that you have a chance to defend yourself with just a little bit more power than the person coming towards you, well, if a guy comes at you with a stick, you use a bigger stick. But that's the argument. I mean, that's the deep philosophy of it. It's crazy. You're only allowed to use whatever force is as necessary to stop the offense on your person or on your property, according to the criminal code. So, I mean, but that's where we go. I mean, societies that don't have a lot of guns don't have a lot of guns. They don't have a lot of gun deaths. So we've just, that is an argument for more gun control. How many guns can a person have or what? So it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm not going to start talking about gun control because I think it's impossible. And you even look at our government dealing with certain gun control issues in Canada, and it's like one government says, well, that's completely reverse what the last one did. So it's a mess.
Now, one of the teachers from Florida, I don't think she was a teacher at that school, but she said she was the teacher of the year for 2016, 2017. And she said, I'm saying what nobody else is saying but needs to say. We need to talk to the parents of these kids. What do you think about that?
That we need to talk to the parents? Of the children?
That parents need to start watching closer, need to start paying more attention, need to get their kids help if that's something, if they notice anything.
Well, have we not said that for years? I mean, we have the fatherless generation, really, and Fort McMurray is no different when you think of the amount of time, concentrated time a loved one spends with a child they're mentoring. Like, maybe stay-at-home moms, and I'm not judging anything, but if you're not giving attention and instruction to your children, then somebody else is raising them, right? And some people do not even know their children well enough to recognize subtle changes in their behavior. It's like, somebody says, all of a sudden, how come my daughter's all of a sudden wearing black? Well, she's been wearing black for a year and a half. You just haven't stopped long enough, or it's always dark when you come home and she's out, because that's the state of affairs in most families right now. I think we really need to we need to look at how are we raising our kids? I mean, we're putting them in school earlier and earlier. I'm going to get in trouble for saying some of this thing, but parental rights are being taken away, and parents are spending less and less time with children. So who's raising them? Who's raising the kids anyways? Never mind watching for signs of emotional instability. Like, good luck, right? A teacher is the one that needs to know, because the teacher watches that child every day. Probably the biggest influence on the life is the teacher, right? So
I think another factor into parenting is just the social norms of today, right? Like social media, and just everything is online now. So it makes components like bullying, it makes components like questioning about who you are, who your identity is, how to handle different things. Also secretive sometimes from parents, where you're not sitting down at the dinner table anymore and talking about how your day was going. It's all online with your friends or with people that you don't agree with, and arguments and fights start online and everything like that, where if parents don't have the opportunity, or kind of maybe sometimes aren't aware, because sometimes the generations are a little bit different, of the impact that social media is having, or the isolation that social media is causing for their kids, and not taking like an active role in making sure that they're present in their kids' lives, it leaves the kids, again, who are still developing, to kind of figure it out on their own. And you will see a lot of times people use online bullying or internet bullying because it's behind a screen, it's not face-to-face, and it's almost easier to say something when you're not face-to-face and you have that kind of screen protection in front of you. And then also the access to the internet and everything that's out there, right? Like, kids are like sponges. Like, they're going to get so much of this input. And just like Rick said, if you're not teaching your kid, if you're not guiding your children the way that you kind of want them to be guided or raised, someone else is, or something else is.
Right.
And if kids are getting all this input, they're again left up to themselves, if they don't have that guidance, to kind of fill filter it themselves, right? And a lot of the times they don't have the experience, or they don't have the wisdom that comes with age, that comes with, being around for longer periods of time to actually navigate that in a healthy way. So then they're left up to, well, all I'm seeing and all I'm hearing about is hate. All I'm hearing about from, I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but all I'm hearing from, like, sometimes if you even look at politicians and stuff like that, they're constantly fighting. So it's like, if our kids are only seeing everyone arguing, everyone fighting, this violence in video games or movies, or even in just adults, what do you kind of expect them to kind of follow? Like, they're gonna follow that, right? If they're not shown a different way of living.
Right. So they've got copious quantities of information and no moral filter to actually interpret it through. Mm-hmm. And the information they're getting is skewed because, like, with bots and things now online, like, you think the information you're getting, wow, there must be a wave of this, but in fact it's 3 or 4 isolated people, and they're moving this, trending this kind of philosophy or trend a certain direction, but it's not the masses that feel that way. Only 1 or 2 feel that way. So there's really skewed. The information's not true always, and again, you need somebody that cares, that is providing a moral filter and some instruction and some counsel as you look at that information, so it's interpreted correctly.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I know we're talking a lot about parents. It's not about putting the judgment on parents. It's not about saying, parents, you're not doing your job. Mm-hmm. I think nowadays in society, it's really hard for one parent to stay home. It is. Like, a lot of the times, financial constraints and everything like that, both parents, for a lot of families, have to be out in the workforce, right? So you have a high level of other people looking after your kids, whether that be nannies, whether that be after school care, all those things. And it's not saying that any of those things are negative or having a negative impact in your kids' lives. But again, then the parents, they're not having the same level of influence possibly as we see in the older years or older generations, where parents were able to and had the opportunity to be around and invest in their kids a little bit more. So what it may look like is just parents now need to take a little bit more of an initiative to make that time in their daily schedules to actually invest in their kids, where their schedules are so busy that time is somewhat not allowed or not given, as opposed to in earlier years.
Well, we're going to chat more about this in just a few minutes. This is Connect You. This is Connect Youth. I'm Steph Seidel. I'm here with Rick Kirshner and Ashley Stacy, and we've been talking about a pretty heavy topic this morning in light of the recent school shooting in Florida on Valentine's Day. We thought we would do a special episode and kind of look at why that's happening and what we think there could be a solution or what are our thoughts on it. And some things were raised. There's obviously the gun control idea, there's social media, there's bullying, there's actual violence in media. There's a lot of whys. I mean, there's never a concrete answer. Right. And especially Ashley unpacked that about there's a million things and factors that play into it. There's kids raising themselves or somebody else raising kids, just a lot of different things. What do you guys think is the hope in this situation?
Well, the hope, the same as you see in any disaster situation, is the goodness in many people does rise up. And so you think of the teacher that threw himself in front of the children and died. In the midst of every calamity, the darkest hours, you see the best of humanity rise up. And I really believe we saw that there, and we'll continue to see that. So in the midst of the disaster, you're always going to see that hope and that life and that somebody loving and compassionately caring for people. You see other people that, risk their life to help get people to care. You see police officers and others rush in, try to apprehend the person. So I think we need to keep seeing in the midst of this darkness, let's focus that there was light emerged. There was many, many people emerged. You see the strength and resilience of people and parents that are now motivated towards doing something good and causing something good to come out as a result of this. They didn't stay despondent, and I can't imagine what I would be, but they didn't stay locked into their trouble or their trauma or their darkness. They said, we are going to get active and do something to make this situation better. And that's what I think we always see in disaster. The best of people comes up when we see the worst of people.
I think that speaks to just humanity and the hope that we have in humanity, or that can be found in humanity, whether you're a religious individual or not. Humans are humans, so we all have kind of the same, sometimes, emotions. We have the same feelings. We have the same wants of wanting to be loved or wanting to be accepted. And I think one of the things that we can do is just be more mindful of our actions and our words to each other, and just like inspire each other and speak words of hope and speak words of encouragement. Because sometimes that person that may be struggling with something have never heard that before. So even taking the initiative to speak out and to speak hope, to speak life, could be all of the difference. And I think there's a lot of people who have done that and who do that on a daily basis. And I think that's a message of hope that we can kind of cling on to, that not everyone is hateful. Not everyone is bringing people down. There are people out there who see the good in people and see the good and the diamonds in people that want to bring that out.
Right.
And if there is someone listening right now who is thinking about being one of those people that cause a disaster, there is help for them as well, and please talk to somebody about it. Ashley works for Legacy Counseling. She'd love to have a sit down with you. Counseling is free for 20 and under at Legacy Counseling as well, so that's a great resource for you. But definitely don't sit in silence and wait for that disaster. Get help.
There's teachers, there's counselors in the schools. Anywhere you go, there's social workers. Go to a politician, go to a bus driver, go to someone will help you and not judge you, try to get you to the help you need and encourage you. Because as Ashley or someone said, we all have down days. There are down days, and sometimes you can stay down a little longer than others. But you don't have to stay there. Reach out to somebody, bring light to that darkness, and it'll dispel it, right? And one thing we can do, continue, and the census 2014 Canada Census said that 94% of Fort McMurrayites have a spiritual orientation. So whether it's whatever it is, whether it's Sikh or Hindu or Christian or Muslim or whatever, people can pray and cast your cares upon a higher power that will help you, and that it'll help you get some peace. And certainly we encourage prayer around here, but for those residents that are given to go that way, do it, and pray for those people in Florida, and pray for all of us that the peace that we've enjoyed in this country will remain, and we're thankful for that peace.
We're going to chat more about this topic at a later date, and we'd love to hear from you. Why don't you shoot us a text, 780-900-0916, or you can email me, Steph, at 911thebridge.com, and let us know your thoughts on this issue, your thoughts on safety, why you think it happens, how you think you can help, and anything to go along those lines. Connect Youth on 91.1 The Bridge.